The Lauri Markkanen trade talk circle is starting to do its rounds a little bit faster than usual. The main thing that's changed has to do with the one and only Golden State Warriors, as they have struck out time and time again since free agency started. Hello there, my name is Wraith Hoops. I cover all things basketball, so if you're intrigued, go and smash that like button, subscribe, turn on post notifications, and let's go ahead and get into this one. Monte Poole of NBC Sports had a radio appearance on 95.7 The Game regarding the Warriors' #1 target going into this offseason with things being as they are. Now, to give a recap for those that either aren't Golden State Warriors fans or are wondering why that has to do with anything, the main reason has to do with the fact that they've just fumbled on multiple occasions. It started out at the beginning when allegedly they told Klay Thompson that they didn't have the money necessary to give him the longer term deal of roughly 4 years, or providing him with max or near max money, and instead elected to offer him a measly 2-year deal. And while it may have made sense on paper, it definitely wasn't appreciated by him. The thing that came from this, though, was him believing that they genuinely didn't want to pay him, and also that they genuinely didn't have the money to. But that all went up in flames when they attempted to pursue Paul George and offered him the max contract that Paul George was desiring. Mind you, Paul George finally had the healthiest season of his Clippers days last season, where he played in 70 plus games for the first time ever in a Clippers uniform. And even despite that, he wasn't necessarily terrific. And at his current age, being his mid-30s, there's only so much in the tank left for him to be a borderline elite player. Obviously, he's not the type of guy that can be your #1 option on a championship caliber team. But if you have somebody that could take off the leadership roles as far as creation goes from a shot making standpoint and just a table setting standpoint from a point guard position, I think that he still has a great deal of value there. However, he's yet to get a ring, so it's kind of up in the air to say that, because we have to admit now that the original trade that sent Paul George from the Oklahoma City Thunder to the Clippers was, ironically enough, the worst trade probably in NBA history, considering it was roughly 7 first-round draft picks plus Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and another player. So that's ugly. But because they decided to go ahead and publicly make that thing a situation, Klay felt very disrespected, because it wasn't a thing of them telling him that they would not give him the money because they just didn't want him to. They told him that they could not provide him with that money because it would mess with their finances too bad. Yet they decided to go right after Paul George and offer him the contract that Klay Thompson was so hungrily desiring. Yeah, that's ugly. And it backfired in their faces, because Paul George ended up obviously signing with the Philadelphia 76ers to create a larger, more competitive team out there. And then because Klay felt disrespected, he decided, you know what, Golden State, you're out of the running, and decided to pick between the Lakers and the Mavericks, and ultimately chose the Mavericks to suit up alongside Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving. That is basically, to sum up, the start of their offseason. With that in mind, they have not made a single meaningful acquisition since. They also, by the way, ended up waiving Chris Paul because they just didn't really have a point in keeping him after the 1 year that was full of a lot of experiments that came and went. Some were successful, some were failing abhorrently, but it's over now, and they allowed him to go off into free agency pastures, where he ultimately ended up signing a 1-year $11 million deal with the San Antonio Spurs. And that ended up making all the difference for him, because he needed that money, and he feels like he still has a lot left to offer a lot of teams. But by being with the Spurs and finally giving Victor Wembanyama the opportunity to have a pure point guard alongside him that has the ability to actually feed him the ball when he's open, it will do wonders for his game, allow him to develop a lot of things, and ultimately it will benefit Chris Paul, because he'll show that he still has it in the tank. And if he can do with Stephon Castle what he was able to do with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander that year that he spent in OKC, I think that is going to be very interesting to watch. Now, how does Lauri fit into all of this? Put plain and simple, Lauri Markkanen is one of the only players still on the open trade market that is even talked about being swapped out. And at his caliber of play, people feel like he might be worth the Mikal Bridges treatment. And the front office with Danny Ainge and Justin Zanuck definitely feels that way. And for those that forgot, Mikal Bridges was traded from the Brooklyn Nets to the New York Knicks in exchange for 5 first-round unprotected picks from the Knicks, along with an unprotected pick swap in the blockbuster deal. There were no players involved, but that's a whole lot of draft capital to be shipping alongside. And I think that that's something that they would expect to receive for Lauri. If for no other reason, they should expect probably 4 first-round picks at minimum. Now, obviously, the value changes if you look at a team like the Spurs, who has Atlanta's picks, who seems like they're about to enter a rebuild, and those picks obviously are valued higher than, say, a pick of the Denver Nuggets or the Boston Celtics, naturally. But I just question if the Warriors will be finding ways to provide that sort of value, because the only really youthful asset that they have on their team is Jonathan Kuminga, and they don't think they necessarily want to put him out there for possible trades. In the right situation, if you're going to get a player that is significantly better than him, it makes sense to make that deal. But the thing that makes it even more tantalizing is the fact that Lauri Markkanen did have an all-star caliber season last year. He made the all-star game the year before and put up a total of 23.2 points, 8.2 rebounds, and 2 assists this year, while shooting almost 50-40-90 from the field. One person on the channel actually made me feel like it was necessary to make this video, because originally I was just going to let it slide under the radar because I didn't necessarily see the complete angle for why Golden State would be hungry enough to make this deal. And then, as if it wasn't already in my face, he brought it up to my attention. The simple fact of the matter is they've struck out too many times, and Steph doesn't have that much time left. At the age of 37 years old, you want to maximize his windom for whatever it's worth, because you don't want him to eventually leave, as you just watched Clay leave to break up that big three. Yes, Draymond's still there, but Draymond effectively is not enough. Who Stephen Curry has running around him is not enough. If they got Paul George and were unable to keep Klay Thompson, then you could have found some level of justification in that. But for the fact that they missed out on both, you effectively have a bunch of young players that aren't significantly successful at any level or superb at any particular metric or skill set in the NBA, alongside an aging Steph and an aging Draymond Green, and things just look ugly from here. JHK had this to say in the comments: I think that if Markkanen gets moved, it will be to the Warriors, just because the Warriors are likely to be the most aggressive of anyone interested. They lost CP3 and Clay, and their salary situation leaves little to no option in free agency. Steph is 37. If they don't make a substantial trade to attempt to get better, the only option becomes moving on from Steph and Draymond into a full rebuild. And that's a hard sell to fans. I don't think any of these other teams who have been mentioned will be as motivated. OKC is already loaded and feels comfortable with the next year, and they have all the time in the world for a move like this later if necessary. San Antonio has time too, and Minnesota doesn't necessarily have the assets because they seem like they want to run their core team back. Honestly, that in and of itself told me a lot and helped me to realize the simplicity of this matter. A lot of times we can be stuck on the trivial things that comes to the NBA game or the players or the front offices, instead of just looking at things bare bones, stripped naked for what it's worth. The simple fact of the matter is Lauri Markkanen isn't the player that is wanted to be traded unless a specific requirement is had. He is available, but it's not a fire sale. It's a if the price is right kind of sale. And it comes down to what team is going to be willing to pay that premium. Because if there's no team that does, I have a strong belief that Danny Ainge is just going to keep Lauri Markkanen on the shelf, run out this year, let him know that, hey, we're going to be tanking this year. And Lauri, understanding that and probably looking at the roster construction and seeing how things are going to look, just openly understands that if he does stay with team this season, he is due for his max extension, which will put a hefty chunk of change in his pocket. He'll just be playing probably less minutes than he played last season. Still being efficient, probably more efficient considering he'll be on a more so minutes restriction than anything. And then he'll also have the opportunity to be around the young guys, kind of just have fun without any expectations for yet another year, because the guy has never sniffed the playoffs before in his entire NBA tenure. But I believe that if he does manage to stay on this team, it will change, or if he does get traded to another team in the Western Conference or the Eastern Conference, they'll be able to make something shake and he'll see new heights either way. But you guys let me know what you think in the comments below. Do you think that the Warriors is an ideal situation for the one Lauri Markkanen? Or do you feel like we're too enamored with the fact that they missed out on a lot of their free agency meetings, and perhaps we're too in love with the possibility of a Lauri Markkanen, Steph Curry pick and roll? After all, that does provide a little bit more danger and conflict than Draymond Green being involved. With that being said, it's your boy Wraith Hoops. Go ahead and smash that like button, subscribe, turn on post notifications, and become a member of the channel to help support the content. As always, good morning, good evening, and good night, no matter where we are on the globe watching. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.